Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first session of our 2026 Travel Unity Virtual Spring Summit. First, I want to thank all of our sponsors, Los Angeles Tourism, Visit Syracuse, Travel Alliance Partnership, the New York Yankees, New Orleans and Company, and Nova HCM. Thank you all for supporting us and this. If you don't know about Travel Unity, we're a nonprofit focused on making travel welcoming to everyone. This is our 10th anniversary, and we are very happy and excited about that. What do we do? We help the travel industry align with inclusive practices. How do we do that? In a lot of ways. Consulting, certifications, workshops, trainings, stuff like this, a lot of different things. We help the travel industry build more pipelines for people knowing about the industry, getting in the industry, and I'm happy to see some of our participants from some of those programs on this call. So thank you for joining us. We also are increasingly providing tools for advocacy to help make communities be more welcoming to different kinds of folks. So that's us. You like all of that? Great. Well, get involved. You can volunteer. All volunteers start with either doing a case study on inclusion in travel or a spotlight on somebody's career within the travel industry. We have a lot of, they're not advisory boards. I got to fix that. Those are working groups. But you can join one of our working groups. You can join the advisory board as well. And you can chat with me about ways we can work together. So email me, Ronnie, RONI at travelunity.org. Anybody who has signed up, you're entered for a prize giveaway for two New York Yankee tickets. We have two sets of two. They're up to $320 in value for each. Also, Nicole Mahoney has offered a couple of covers, not just the covers, the books too, for her hardcover of her book, Stronger Together, Building World-Changing Collaborations That Succeed. So Nicole Mahoney from Travel Alliance Partnership supporting the event in a variety of ways. Thank you, Nicole and TAP. For these sessions, please use the chat. And when we have questions and comments at the end, this time is for you. So use it and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and do all those sorts of things. If you're not in the Alliance yet, we have lots of different types of membership. Please consider joining us. And these videos will be available. If you're watching it, that's pretty obvious. But if you're here live, know that if you registered, you will have access to these videos first, and then we'll open them up slowly to everybody. I will introduce our folks in a second, but our session right now is Destinations Under Federal Pressure. Our session after this will be Association Pulse Checks, and we have a variety of associations participating in that. Tuesday, tomorrow, for those live, we are have Public Lands, Public Memory, American Stories at 2:50, and America, the Land I Still Love, Choosing and Building a Life in the U.S. Wednesday, Innovation, Technology, and the Human Experience, as well as the future of the travel workforce. And our last day is on Thursday with Local Action, How Your Voice Drives Community Change, and Caught in the Middle, Destinations in Uncertain Times. All right. Well, we have our folks ready to talk about the things that we're looking to talk about today. So with that, I invite Melvin and Jaimee to introduce themselves.
Jaimee, you first.
Thanks, Melvin. And Ronnie, thanks for having us here today. Great to join you. My name is Jaimee Lucky Hendrickson. I'm President and CEO of Visit St. Paul, the capital city of Minnesota. Did you want more than that, Ronnie?
We're good for now. I think we're going to
Okay,
have a lot of
perfect.
context.
Awesome.
They're gonna get to know both of you pretty well over the next 52 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm Jaimee's counterpart across the Mississippi River in Minneapolis. Meet Minneapolis, Melvin Tennant. I'm the CEO of Meet Minneapolis, our destination organization for our city. And we're glad to be with you. And we're partners in lots of different things. So looking forward to this discussion today. So thank you for having me.
All right, Melvin, you're going to kind of lay out what's going on, what's been happening, and I think it'll help set everything up. So have at.
Absolutely. I'll be running through these 5 or 6 slides pretty quickly. Jaimee will certainly add whatever is appropriate from the St. Paul perspective. But just to give you a quick overview, we've put our experience, which seems like it's been months and months and months, but it's really a fairly compact amount of time, starting in phase one, where the federal operation began in December, going into phase two into early January, where there was significant escalation and national attention. We certainly received a lot of that national attention, as you well know. Phase three, we would characterize as legal battles and community mobilization. I'm really excited to talk about how our communities have really risen up to support each other. And then four, the phase four, the peak unrest period and some of the tourism impacts. And then on phase five, the further on impact and then our community response. And before I ask Ronnie to switch to the next slide, just the image that you see is a peaceful protest of tens of thousands of people during the ICE surge, the Operation Metro surge, really standing up. And that is our US Bank Stadium in the background, and that's the Commons Park right in front of that. So it was very cold that day, but the community came out to really make a statement. The next slide. So it's phase one. December 1 through 3rd is when the announced surge began, the largest federal immigration operation in Minnesota history, which at its peak was more than 3,000 agents in the state. So even though they were mainly in St. Paul and Minneapolis, this was a statewide operation. Moving on in December, our city, and I know your city is as well, Jaimee, limits cooperation with ICE. We only had just a couple of communities in the state that did offer cooperation with ICE in apprehensions and deportations. Again, deportation flights increase at our airport, very large operation there. And then finally, civil rights concerns, reports of US citizens being detained early in Operation Metro Surge. So we had expanded federal presence. Those additional agents arrived. Political spotlight. Kristi Noem, one of her several visits to Minnesota while she was head of DHS. We then saw federal infrastructure established. The Whipple office building is a federal building that's located near our airport, where a lot of the processing and actual detentions were taking place for citizens that were apprehended. And then on January 7th was the first of two fatal shootings in our community in Minneapolis of Renee Good, followed by mass protests, which where I will just stress were peaceful. Intense but peaceful. Moving into January, Minnesota, Minneapolis, and St. Paul challenged the operation in court. Judge restricts action against protest observers. A lot of legal wrangling during that time. By mid-January, arrests had surged to 2,400 people.
Melvin, sorry to interrupt. I just out of curiosity, were Melvin or Jaimee, were either of you involved in any of the actual court proceedings? Like, were you in court at any point, or was that not part of what you?
No.
Neither of us were, but through our partner organizations, either directly through governmental units or even individuals that I'm sure we both know were somehow within the legal apparatus.
And our mayors for sure. And yeah.
Thank you.
And then moving on to the end of phase three, lots of volunteer patrols came up really warning their neighbors of when there was potential ICE action. So again, a lot of neighbor helping neighbor during the course of this operation. Ronnie, moving into phase four. This is where we saw the peak unrest from late January to mid to late January. Daily demonstrations, again, peaceful across the Twin Cities. Sadly, on January 24th, a second fatal shooting of Alex Preddy in South Minneapolis on a Saturday morning. I remember it very clearly. Next, we saw demonstrations outside of our hotels that were housing federal agents or purported to be housing federal agents. A lot of that was not necessarily confirmed. And then finally, the judge declines to halt the operation for a variety of reasons, so it continued during that peak period. And then the wind down, the impact and community response. After there was a change with the leader on the ground of this operation, that's when the operation began to scale back. As you can see here, February 4th was the announcement of 700 agents leaving. February 12th was the official day that this surge ended, even though that didn't mean all of the agents were leaving, but just this emphasized action to apprehend people was ending in terms of that particular operation. Um, as you can imagine, local businesses and restaurants were hit hard. Weeks of raids and unrest really uh, impacted workers, impacted residents. So there was just a wide impact across our community. One thing I will say is that on February 25th was our annual meeting. So in the midst of all of this, we were actually planning the Meet Minneapolis annual meeting. And so from the time we began planning last fall to the time it was executed, we had lots of changes to how the theme was going to be manifest. And then finally on this slide, fundraisers like Salt Cure, uh, supported by the platform Toast, which is in restaurants. You've probably seen those. They gave a significant amount of matching dollars, and so far the Salt Cure Fund, directly related to supporting restaurants, has generated more than $1 million, and several other funds um, are being generated right now to help small businesses.
Thank you, Melvin. So, Jaimee, I mean, in terms of their twin cities, their two cities, was would you say these were the same experience in St. Paul and Minneapolis, or yeah,
I would say very similar. I will say a lot of the direct, I mean, the unfortunate, killings of two of our community members happened directly in Minneapolis. A lot of that activity um was more so in Minneapolis, but yeah, I mean the impact across both cities. And I will say, I mean, when I think back, and I think Melvin had commented, like this was a relatively short period of time, though it feels like forever. I can't remember January, when was that? But we had just been coming off a big event that we'd been planning for 3 years. We had a big international ice hockey tournament between our two cities. It wrapped up on January 5th. And so we had been, putting a lot of energy into that. We're feeling a lot of momentum. And you come off a big event like that, and then that's all just a blur now. Everything changed really quickly. I think too, as Melvin goes through that timeline, it also just is this I mean, for those of you who've, worked through COVID, where it was like you never knew the day after day what was going to be the next thing, what, you're trying to make decisions where everything's changing moment by moment. And that is really kind of what those months were really feeling like.
so I would imagine that no matter what, there's still kind of a feeling of tension and discomfort. But in terms of, when things were at their peak and wherever they're at now, are things better in terms of the federal intervention pieces? Like what is it really like on March 23rd, 2026 in your respective cities?
I mean, I'll let Melvin chime in too. I mean, I think it's better. I think there's definitely, I don't think, ICE agents have completely left the area. I don't think they're back down. I guess I don't know for a fact, but I think the numbers are still higher in the state than they had been. I think there's like just the residual. I mean, I think our business owners, our employees, there's a lot of people that they don't, aren't feeling that necessarily. But Melvin, I'll let you chime in too. I mean, I think there is a definite change in kind of feeling and intensity. Yeah.
I would agree. I want to give it maybe a little bit of context that we are both fairly small cities geographically, and so a presence of this number of agents has a greater relative impact than it did in a city like a Chicago or Los Angeles. So you may hear numbers of agents, but it was really a lot of impact. So I would agree with what Jaimee said. Day to day, I think things are better, but people are still nervous. I was just at a little shopping center just a few days ago, and I saw a shop, a Latino-owned shop that still had in Spanish written in a sign that our doors are locked, please ring the doorbell. So that was a common type of signage that you would see at a lot of Latino and other immigrant-owned businesses, just to give a little extra time in case they were there to try to take somebody. So I still saw that just very recently, but I do feel as though the sense of just oppression is not quite as strong as it once was, although people are still very much aware that something is still going on.
So you talked about size. Could you tell me what your respective populations are?
Minneapolis is right at 425,000.
Yeah, we're right around 300, just
Okay.
under 300.
So I want to zoom out. This is not the first crisis you guys have had to deal with in the past few years. So, if we go over less than a decade, we have George Floyd, we have COVID, we have this. So, um, w looking through this perspective of crisis, what are the similarities and differences between these three different things? I'll answer part of it, which is that the middle one everybody was dealing with, right? But the George Floyd and this, there was smaller groups in terms of who had to handle these situations, and also there was a lot of national attention. So even if there were ICE agents who were in other cities, they didn't have the incidents that happened there. So, looking at this arc, what was similar and different in terms of how you guys had to navigate these three different periods of time?
Melvin, do you want us to kick that one off?
Sure. You said it initially, Jaimee, how this was every day was something new. You didn't really have a playbook for what was going to happen. And with 2020 and all of us experiencing the pandemic, followed by the tragedy of a Minneapolis police officer killing a citizen on May 25th, 2020, we always describe it as a crisis within a crisis. And over that course of time, I know that our team developed protocols and communication strategies and developed strong partnerships with other business associations and with government that we thought would serve us well should anything else happen. But sadly, with the intricacies of this federal intervention and presence, some of those lessons were applicable, but this was something totally different. And I'll just give a little sidebar before I pause and allow Jaimee to speak. But back in 2020, our citizens were very much opposed to the Minneapolis police because the Minneapolis police was the perpetrator of that murder. And now, over the course of those 5 years, the um, I guess the relationship with the police has changed, and the police were actually in support of the citizens who were here trying to defend themselves from federal agents. So that's an interesting little shift for us. But as far as our team goes, um, lots of protocols in place, but we also know that our team from 2020 and to now still is exhausted.
Mhm.
Yes.
I want to
Mhm.
stay quickly with Melvin on the police bit because that's its own sort of story. Were you personally in Meet Minneapolis involved with some of that transition, or was that more kind of an awareness thing? Like, what was your role, if any, in terms of that piece when there was that transition in
Sure.
policing?
Well, our role has always been, Ronnie, and your guests here, to provide the most accurate and up-to-date information. So we try to be as just, I want nonpartisan, if you will, but we want to be the trusted source of visitors. So we wanted to provide the information regardless of whether it's good or bad and how it reflected on us. But what I will say is that during the course of 2020, um, many of our city council members actually, on June, I can remember the date in June of 2020, 9 of our 13 city council members um, stood up and called for defunding our police department. So this was a very prominent um, movement for a long time. That never happened. It actually went to a vote of the citizens, and the citizens voted it down. And of those 9 city council members who voted, who announced that they wanted to support defunding the police, fast forward to today, none of those council members are on our board, are on city council anymore. All 9 are gone. So that's what I would say about the sort of the evolution of the relationship with the police.
I'll push a little more on this one. Did you when you have like news about stuff like that, I don't know how much that became national news, but did you have people reaching out in terms of saying, "Hey, I don't know if I could come there because I'm worried you guys don't have police"?
Well, yeah, it was that was a big part of it. But I'll give you an interesting other twist. Not necessarily having police to protect you when you're here, but we actually had a group that was planning to come that was comprised of a lot of youth, many of those youth of color. And the organizers were not concerned that we wouldn't have police. They were more concerned that those police would not be treating those young men of color well. So we had a couple of different twists on that. So,
How did you answer that when they brought that to you?
well, the good news is that we have great relationships with our government and police department, and our police chief at the time met with and had calls with a number of customers to reassure them. Again, every everyone is advised that your personal safety is your own responsibility, and you'll have to assess the situation yourself. But we provided all of that information with the support of our local government, particularly our police department.
So just to clarify, and then I'll let Jaimee chime in. You had a group, and you directly connected the group with the police chief to like talk to them about their
Yeah, we
concerns.
facilitate those conversations. Absolutely. Yes.
Cool. Thank you, Melvin. Jaimee,
Well, okay, we're on the question about what was so similar and what was different.
we're on whatever you want to be on.
Okay.
That one works. Sure.
I mean, one thing, in the last couple of months, I mean, sitting in these meetings with business owners who are struggling and community members who are struggling, and then city leaders who are trying to figure out what to do or being called to do something. And, in one meeting, I remember a business owner being like, why aren't we just pulling out, what we did in COVID? Why aren't we doing the same things we did in COVID? And it's like, after COVID, there was incredible federal financial support to recover. And that's something that we know isn't coming. And so I think that's been a real difference and challenge.
That's an interesting contrast. I know a lot of organizations and destinations in the travel space where they were flush and they were able to do things they never were able to do before.
Mhm.
So that's a big difference. So even though you had this sort of uncertainty, there was that. That's a really
Yeah.
great point.
And Melvin touched on, people, he talked about the Salt Cure Fund, but I mean, the number of foundations and even our city councils and places that are like just trying to find funds that can be used for relief. I think the hard part though is just even knowing, do those amount of funds even scratch the surface, for what financial damage has been done, or to make sure. I think that was the same thing during COVID, right? It was like in our organizations that are typically like inviting in outside tourists, and we couldn't do that at that time, and during this has been kind of similar, like what's the right thing to be doing. But it's really this realization, like we need to make sure these places are here when we get through this, and through recovery. Because if we don't have, like, these are like these businesses, these in our attractions, whatever, they're like what makes up the story of our city. They're what brings people to our city. And
Absolutely.
if we don't have those, like, and I sat in meetings with business owners too that were like, hey, in the next few months, like the whole face of this city could change dramatically based on the reality of the struggle that a lot of businesses are in.
You're so right. We're both cities made up of neighborhoods. That's really part of our story, just like you said. So it's important that those small businesses be supported, because I always like to say that they keep the promises that we make. We can tell them all of the great attributes of our city on a very high level, but they're the ones that have to make it happen day to day.
Mhm.
So you talked about sort of the not knowing what was going on and all of that. And I guess I'm curious, and also people saying, hey, why don't we do what we did last time? So how do you handle, as leaders of organizations and as members of these bigger networks? So this is going to be a complex question, but both within your own ecosystem and being part of these bigger discussions, how do you handle when you don't have enough information, where there just is no way to have all the information to make the best decision? How do you deal with that?
I call Melvin. Just kidding. I mean, I think it was like right
It's
away
not a
though. It was a
terrible
lot of like,
answer.
it's
Like,
like
yeah.
what's happening? So I pick up the phone, I call up Melvin, I call up Lauren, who's the head of Explore Minnesota, I call up the head of Hospitality Minnesota, right? And just be like, okay, I see you're doing this webinar. That's really smart. I love how you're bringing people together. How can we help? What can we do? Or, like Melvin, what do we, what's happening? And it's everything from like, uh, working, because I think for organizations, a crisis happens, and one of the first things is like looking within and at your own team,
Mhm.
which can also be the hardest. Like how do we make sure, what do we tell them? How do we support them too? How do we bring everyone in? How do we collectively use our expertise to do the right thing or, respond? So, internal questions, but then also external too. I think it's hard too, because I think there's so much of you want to do something. You want to like, what can we do? What should we be doing? And in some of these moments, it was like, okay, take a step back. We can't, there's nothing to do in this second, or I mean, there's stuff to do in figuring out what to do, but in terms of action, some of it's the unknown of what's coming next. It's trying to develop the next plan, but knowing that you may never deploy it because something might completely change in the meantime as well. And I think I remember talking to my board vice chair in like the first, that first week of January, and like, okay, like here's what I'm working on. Here's I need to get this out. I need to do this. And she's like, okay, you're doing all the right things, but also like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but this isn't something that's going to end next week. You're going to
Mhm.
be responding to this for a long time. So it's kind of that being able to recognize that and use that as well.
But when I'm sure in your community too, Jaimee, it caused you to really tap into existing partnerships, probably create new partnerships.
Absolutely.
So strange bedfellows, so to speak. So I know that during COVID, a coalition of philanthropic and civic and corporate entities sort of came together on a weekly call, and we didn't get to that point because things were unfolding so quickly. And this time, really knew who those partners were and could reach out to them and get some answers. So that groundwork was laid, and so I'm fortunate that we were able to know where our lane was and to be able to plug in. Exactly right.
I want to go into the personal and professional bit. So just how all of this has affected you as human beings and as the leaders of your organizations, just whatever you're up for sharing.
Well, I know that our team is exhausted. And if you look at particularly those that are directly involved in marketing the city, just really the wave of negativity that was just coming, and how do they overcome that? And so we observed lots of fatigue, and so we gave lots and lots of grace, not unlike what we did during COVID. But I know as a leader, it's important to make sure that the team you have out on the field is well equipped and feels like they're ready to do the job. But I know candidly sometimes I've denied my own needs because we just want to really focus on the team, the ones that you're really counting on to make it happen. I know that's happened in my case.
Yeah, I agree, Melvin. I even think so. Looking what when you walked through that timeline, and you just think back to those moments and just like the different, state. I think me personally, and a lot of us were in. Everything's so heightened. You're like, what's gonna come next? What's going on? And there was a real like dissonance between like what you're hearing from locally and people and what you're hearing nationally, or what, family members in other states are saying about you and your state, and it's like, what? That's not how it's happening here. So there's a lot of just heightened, feeling. And I think as people, we don't always recognize how much that is impacting us. I think Melvin's right, like that feeling exhausted. I think I think I had a moment where, you know, members of my staff kind of came to me and were like, what you're going through being a leader right now we recognize that's really difficult. And, make sure and like take time for you and do what you need to do too. So, um, yeah, I think we don't always recognize in the
Yeah.
moment, or even now, it's March 23rd. We aren't really, it's not just over, it's still there.
And we promote ourselves as the entity, our destination organizations, as the leaders, representatives, advocate for the industry. So that responsibility rests on our shoulders. It's almost as if we have the weight of the well-being of our whole industry on our shoulders. And people are always asking for what should we do now, like you said. So and we don't always have all the answers, but that I think the weight of that responsibility is there. Just as I remember talking to a lot of my counterparts during COVID, they felt that same weight on their shoulders for their respective communities. And I think it's very similar in that regard. Where what are we going to do? Can we keep our team motivated? Can we figure out what resources are available? You're just constantly trying to connect the dots and figure out the best way to serve your team and also your industry.
So I want to dig a little deeper on the self-care thing. What do both of you do? It sounds like Melvin, you kind of admitted that you're not always letting yourself or forcing yourself to do that. So when you can practice that self-care, what do each of you do?
Um, is there a separate session where we can work on this? No. Okay. I like to play tennis. So luckily I still am in a tennis league, that's like every other week or so. So that's been good to push myself to like go do that. I will say I've felt like, personally through this. So I have a spouse and two children, and I will say it feels like over the last couple of months, like I come home and like, can I just take a nap? Or like not having a lot of energy. That doesn't feel great, when like you come home to your family with that. So, um, that's been something to like has definitely had an impact. And yeah, and they understand.
So the pendulum of activity and no activity seems to be the swing for you.
Mm-hmm. Kind of.
Melvin?
Well, I do like physical activity. Try to make sure I'm in the gym doing whatever I need to do for that particular day on a very consistent basis. I have a lot as Jaimee does too, a lot of friends in the industry, a lot of colleagues that still call and ask how you're doing. So it's good to know that people are paying attention and are calling and asking, how are you doing? Not that they can really do anything, but having a lot of conversations, outlets about things that are going on. But I would say that most importantly for me, I'm a person of faith, and I really take that to heart during difficult challenges like this, and know that I don't have all the answers, so I don't try to have all the answers, but I really rely on my faith to make sure that I am able to continue on each day, because it's a struggle sometimes to, if you just relying on your own strength, that'll get tapped out really quickly.
Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
So, if we were just talking about destinations or destination organizations overall, there's a whole story about, the change from CVBs to marketing to management and stewardship and all that sort of stuff. Um, you can multiply that by whatever amount when you're in a situation like this. So, given whatever your scope is, how are you managing those realities of as an organization, you're intended to do a certain thing, but there's a lot of bleed there. So how have you managed to navigate when how do you balance what you're intended to be doing as an organization and all the extra needs of your community and ecosystems? You're starting, Jaimee.
Okay, I'll start. It's interesting you bring this up because I was thinking about, kicking off 2026 or the plan when we kicked off 2026. We're in the second year of a 3-year strategic plan. And so, you look at that and you look, you're going into the first quarter, what are we planning to do and how all that kind of has to shift. But how our team I guess I'll answer this just in a way of saying, we were in a board meeting and that was helpful to just have an open conversation with the board, like what is Visit St. Paul doing and what is the expectation that Visit St. Paul is doing? And we really, just through all this have done a lot of listening. But I think across our organization, we're small, but with 3 main departments. And I think across each department, it's really looking at ways to be intentional. And so everything from like in our partnership department, it was like taking the last couple months to make phone calls to every partner and just check in. So open conversation of how things are looking, what's happening with you, et cetera. In our bi-monthly partner meeting, it's having an open forum for people to feel comfortable, hopefully safe and comfortable to talk about their experiences and what they're looking for. On our sales team, it's been having conversations with meeting planners who have questions, trying to find the right resources and answers for them. And whether that's a letter or conversation from our mayor, just to reach out and be like, here's what we're doing in St. Paul. Here, we want you to come. We're ready for you to come. They also, they went out to each of our hotels and purchased lunch from a local, like immigrant-owned restaurant and brought in lunch for their staff. So things like that. On the marketing side, it was really just a total shift. But I mean, I'll say this. I will say that our brand narrative kicks off with St. Paul is a capital city where over 100 languages are spoken and diversity is celebrated in food festivals and art. A city that cares for its heritage, its people, its natural places, and for those who come to visit. I mean, really, like with that alone within our brand narrative is really I like what we've talked about is the messaging. It's like this, we've been through this. We've had some people have responded to Minnesota saying like, wow, look how Minnesota responded. And others have responded to Minnesota saying like, oh my gosh, terrible, but to say like, this is our unapologetic pride about who we are and the people in our community we care about. And so when I say that our marketing team had to shift, it really was, in terms of outgoing messaging and timing of things and whatnot. But they are really, as we look to the next quarter and our um, campaigns and communication that we're doing are really being intentional about thinking about how can we have as much spotlight and potentially direct sales impact if possible, on these businesses that are really hurting.
That's exactly right, what you've just said. We shifted our marketing emphasis from external I mean, during that period of time, it was not prudent, it wasn't appropriate, it just wasn't the right thing to do. But then to focus on our local businesses that we need to keep those promises that we've made, as I mentioned previously. The we had a lot of things in place already, but certainly webinars for our partner businesses. I think that's a great what you did when calling all your partner businesses. We tried also to be very give a lot of grace when it came to dues renewals during that period of time. We actually had a couple of different programs going on. We had a Minneapolis for Minneapolis program similar to what we did during COVID, which was at that point, we need us. So just a sort of the moral focus on being able to support your neighbors in one way or another. Then we had a program specifically for restaurants called Go Gift Give. So either go to a restaurant, buy a gift card, or give to one of the funds like Salt Cure. So we really pushed that out in conjunction with several business associations. Again, just realizing that we have resources and we have bandwidth when we're not marketing externally, we've redirected that to ways in which we could help our local community. And I think as a tourism marketing organization, you mentioned and you referenced it earlier, Ronnie, our scope continues to evolve as destination organizations. And this probably was a way in which we demonstrated that to our community. And we've become, as Visit St. Paul is, sort of a trusted resource. And even sometimes you and I probably get calls, Jaimee, for things that are clearly outside of our realm. But the fact that we have performed from time to time after time rather, suggests that people are paying attention to what our successes have been.
All right, I have plenty of more questions, but I do want to invite, is there anybody who is attending today who has any questions for Melvin and Jaimee? All right, you can use the raise hand function. Oh, Narissa, do you got something?
Yes, thank you, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Hi, Melvin and Jaimee. I'm Narissa Marbury of One Epiphany LLC. Thank you so much for sharing the experiences that has occurred in your respective cities and state. And one of the things that I'm wanting to know, especially given that this is a travel unity event, but have you experienced unity from your neighboring states as far as support that could be leveraged from a regional marketing? And how are you potentially approaching that as you're moving into the warmer weather months, when I'm sure you typically have a higher number of inbound travelers who are not from the immediate region as well?
Melvin, I was, it makes me think of the Salt Cure Fund and that
Yeah,
day of the day, that you guys led. Yeah.
yeah. Narissa, thank you for your question. We as I mentioned previously, we're part of an effort called Salt Cure, which was raising money for local restaurants and very much supporting that. I think it was February the 18th, where there was a day of giving. And to answer your question, we had several of our partners across the country that contributed. One that comes to mind is Madison, Wisconsin, Los Angeles, California, and there are many others. I don't want to exclude anyone, but we had a wonderful outpouring of support from our Destinations International, our trade association supported us. So I think people understood, Narissa, that we were not the authors of this chaos. We were being sort of the ones who were happened to be in the target at this particular point in time. And I think a lot of people realize that this could possibly happen in their communities too. And so there was really a great deal of empathy that was expressed. So I'm very my heart is warmed by that support that we saw. So it just really showed that to your point, we are a unified industry, even though we're competitors from city to city, state to state. But when something like this happens, we stand up and help our partners from across the country. So we're very pleased with that.
I'll take Jaimee's nodding as agreement on that. So yeah, write in chat or use the raise hand function if anybody else has any other questions. I want to go off script for a second. I want to ask this question sensitively, but I think it's an important one. You mentioned Minnesota and the context, of being in a state. What 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 are you hoping for from Explore Minnesota, in general going forward? Like what to whatever degree, if they've been involved up until now, what has that looked like? And then as people who are in this situation, and then, by extension, somebody else who might be in something not identical, but what have you gotten? If that's an appropriate question, what are you looking for from Explore Minnesota?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And Lauren is the executive director there, and Melvin and I had both had really good conversations with her, and I think feel supported in that way. I think, the reality is there's two. I mean, it's Explore Minnesota is representing the entire state, and we recognize that. Also, we recognize that the metro is a vital contributor economically to the state as a whole. If our two cities aren't doing well, it's not going to be good for the entire state. So I recognize, the balance that an organization like Explore Minnesota has to look at. And I think in the conversation that Melvin and I had with Lauren last week, do feel like they are they've got I can't tell you right now because the campaign hasn't been announced yet, but they are doing some work to really respond to the moment. And I think that's important, and I appreciate that.
So I guess to not to have you share something that you can't share, but is this campaign a new campaign, or is it reframing a campaign you were going to be doing anyway? Or can you not even answer that?
I understand it as new. And even I understand it as tapping into some kind of maybe new cities or beyond like a typical reach, like based on data and based on um responding to the moment, and Melvin, help me out here. Is that how you understand it too? Is
No,
that
that's exactly right. And so we're anxious to see how it's going to roll out, but clearly it's like you said, it's responding to the moment and what the new realities are within our national marketplace. So um, we appreciate the fact that Explore Minnesota has thought a little bit more creatively on this particular occasion.
So I guess the kind of more general thing is if somebody, a city, a region, a county, whatever, goes through something like this, for the state to just pause, listen, and adjust in whatever way that might be to go, hey, where we are now is not necessarily where we were on December 31st or January 1st. So by doing that, you feel supported, and there can be that necessary adjustment that if they're not listening and they're not engaged, you're going to miss that moment. And in the case of Minnesota and the Twin Cities, it sounds like you've been able to meet that by taking that time.
yeah,
I
being
would
heard
agree.
and acknowledged, is key. And I think this feels like that type of response.
So I'll leave my last question as, there's so many different, and we have another question which we'll do after this one, and then we'll see if anybody else has any more. But my last question is, you guys have gone through a lot. My assumption, knowing that you both are empathetic, kind people, is that you would not wish this upon anybody. But if somebody were, to go through crises similar, different, what would you want to impart upon them, as some last thoughts here?
Um, well, thank you. That's probably part of one of these days, writing a playbook, writing a book. But the first thing that I would suggest that a person do is to make sure that you are fully communicating with your team 100%, because one of the things you don't want to happen is that there's a bit of information that your team who supports you finds out other than through you within regarding a situation. So through whatever means that is, talk to your team. And I always look at communications as a concentric circle. Your team, your board, your partners, your partner organizations, but it's that communication. And it sounds so trite, but it is so vital. Again, going back to when we were during the pandemic and people were in isolation, it was a way for us to make everybody feel as though they were still a part of the team, and we still take that very seriously and really look at our team as being our most important asset.
Thank you, Melvin. Jaimee, last thoughts before our last
Um,
question?
yeah, I would really second what Melvin said. I think too, gosh, like I said, I like to just reach out. It's a great time to reach out as to as many people and listen when you don't know what to do. I think that's like, okay, start making some calls, start listening, um, bringing people in. So I think in alignment with what Melvin said about communicating with the team, I think that's been really instrumental.
So the last question is about budget in general, and it might be too early for right now for this, maybe not. But in general, what advice do you have in terms of how to handle when there are budget issues? How do you deal with the fact that, you wanted to do all these things, you intended to do all these things, but the money ain't there?
I think we vote with our budgets wherever the priorities are. And of course, when you have the ability to shift priorities, as in, if you're going to launch a national marketing campaign and then a crisis occurs, it depends on where you are in that actual planning. But if you have to pause or divert, you just have to do that. And obviously, through whatever mechanism you use to get approvals, make sure you have all of your stakeholders on board. I think people are very understanding, um, even those that are your funders, when you have to make a shift.
Jaimee?
I don't think I have anything specific to add to that.
Awesome. Well, I thank you both for this. I was very much looking forward to having this chat with you guys, and I got various messages on the back end how excited people were that we were able to have this dialogue. So I really appreciate that.